Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Spring Has Sprung, and we'll be talking about how climate change is affecting the seasons. First, we need to start off by giving a little bit of an introduction to ourselves, who we are, and why we joined CHEP and the Newman Climate Movement. So my name is Aviva Bio. I'm a senior at Amsa High School. I'm a member of the New Haven Climate Movement and an intern at the Climate Health Education Project. And I joined because I've always been interested in environmentalism. I plan on studying environmental studies when I go to Southern next year. Well, yeah, next year in the fall. And yeah, I've just been like constantly curious about it, I guess, ever since middle school, digging like holes in the garden and planting strawberries. And I don't got no green thumb, not at all. But I was always just interested in it, worried about the environment. And I just didn't like that we always had like this doom mentality, like, oh, we're going to die if we don't do anything, which is true, which is why
Oh,
I
bye.
found and,
Hi, Byron.
and yeah, that's kind of my backstory. Qatar, if you'd like to go next.
Sure. So my name is Qatar Nadama. I go to the Engineering and Science University Magnet School in New Haven, and I'm a senior. And I'm also part of the New Haven Climate Movement and an intern with the Climate Health Education Project. I joined the New Haven Climate Movement and the Climate Health Education Project back in the summer of 2020. And I really just joined because I got really interested in kind of social justice movements after, what happened in the summer. And I was just inspired by just a lot of the young climate activists really kind of showed me that like you're never too young to make a change, and I really want to make a change in like the world. And I was like, the best way to start is really with your community, with your own backyard. And Snake, if you want to go next.
Yeah, so definitely I like to echo what Aviva and Qatar have already said. But yeah, as an intern at the Climate Health Education Project, I definitely wanted to join because I was like heavily motivated once I saw the work that other people are doing. And I've always been into like different environmental issues, so I've always wanted to like learn more about them, see how they really affect us and how we can actually combat them. So specifically with climate change, when you really learn about the magnitude and the scope of this issue and how it really affects us, I just became really interested in making sure that I'm educated about it, I can educate others about it, and I can help other people like see what they can do to help combat it. And I noticed once I started speaking that I never introduced myself, so I'll do that right now. So yeah, I'm Snikta. I'm a freshman at the Engineering and Science University. Why did I even say it? I'm a freshman at ESUMS. But yeah, and yeah, definitely like I echo what Aviva and Qatar said. I think they covered a lot of it, but yeah, that's also why I joined as well.
And now to give a brief history, just some background information on NHCM, as we did mention it. New Haven Climate Movement is a climate activist group made up of high school and college students, and we currently have 4 initiatives. We have the Climate Education Committee, which is focusing on strengthening climate education in New Haven public schools. Then we have the Electric Future campaign, which is pushing to get New Haven 100% electrified. We have the New Haven Rescue Plan, which is pushing for the city of New Haven to invest $9 million into climate action projects and climate prevention projects. And then we have the CT Green New Deal, which is pressuring the CT House, Senate, and Governor Lamont to, invest in green jobs and climate action. So in a nutshell, we're trying to educate people about climate change, promote our cause, and gain more volunteers, and campaign for funding to go towards climate mitigation efforts at a local level. Next, we have CHEP, which is the Climate Health Education Project, which me, Snikta, and Qatar are all a part of. And we're the sister group of NHCM, and we focus on promoting climate education in schools. So we have 2 interns at every school, and we just talk to our teachers about implementing climate lessons, little mini lessons, just trying to get the word out. So recently for Climate Week, which is this week, we're hosting events of chalking at our schools. And so ESUMS and Amistad, we're going to chalk on Friday. Wait to see those on our Instagram at CHEP, this Climate Health Education Project, on our Instagram. And yeah, we're just trying to promote climate education. And as you can see here, we have CHEP interns at Career High School holding our banner, which is used for our Board of Education kind of initiative, which is pressuring the BOE to invest in, the BOE to pass the climate emergency resolution. And then we also have a picture of us talking to Mayor Elliker at our February 14th demonstration, Valentine's Day, which we were just asking for, the city to again invest in climate action.
Yeah, so I'll take it away now. So the theme of this webinar is to talk about how the seasons are really affected by climate change. It's kind of a specific topic, but we thought it was very suiting as spring has just started. So spring has sprung. But yeah, I'm going to be talking about like how it really affects how the seasons have changed. And then after that, I'll talk about the effects of having these seasons shift. And so there have been a lot of studies that show that by having these warmer global temperatures that are caused by climate change, the timings of the different seasons and their durations are shifting, they're changing. And even the slightest changes in the temperature is enough to push the spring to start earlier and have shorter winters. And overall, it just offsets all of these seasons. And so one of the main effects of this is that it can cause many of the trees and flowers and other plants to bloom a lot earlier than they're supposed to. And having these changes in the timings can leave them prone to colder weathers in the near future, which can kill them. And basically just having this whole shifting in how the seasons are starting, like we'd have shorter winters, spring would start earlier and be longer, we'd have longer summers, we'd have later falls. And like I said before, the changes in the timing can really change how the ecosystems are functioning because, like I said before, having earlier spring would have a longer growing season, and this could lead to a longer allergy season, or even because of this prolonged season where they're able to grow, more invasive species are able to grow and develop and really invade different areas. And then another example of an effect would be through unusual warmth in winter. There is like a trigger that will cause plants to start sprouting early, they'll start growing. And like I kind of mentioned this example before, but because they're already starting to grow, and even if this is like, let's say in winter, the harsh weathers of winter will come immediately after, and they're not prepared for that. And so they'll immediately be killed off, and this would reduce how many crops are being grown and overall kill the population of all these plants. And so to go to the next slide, I'll go a little bit more into the overall effects. So on like a broader sense, just to describe some of the effects of how the seasons are shifting and why this is even important. The first point is just this can cause different life cycle durations for different species that rely on each other. They work together because some plants would be growing a lot sooner than they should be, but maybe some birds are only being hatched after, and so they don't have a food source, or it could be vice versa. But anyways, just like having these seasons be shifted around, the life cycles will be triggered at different spots, and these species that really need each other to survive, they won't have each other. The second point is that, kind of mentioned before again, the early arrival of warmer temperatures will cause the plants to blossom earlier. And on the next slides, we actually have some graphs that show some data about how these plants are starting to blossom earlier. But these plants, when they're blossoming earlier because of these false triggers, they're susceptible to frost and harsh climates because they're not supposed to actually be sprouting then. And because of these harsh climates, they can die, like they can ultimately die, but this would hurt the fruits, the nuts, the seeds, anything that the plant is producing. And because of these higher temperatures, there's also higher risk of drought and other natural disasters that can really hurt these plants and cause a decrease in our crops. And the planting zones would have to shift a lot further north in order to get the correct growing conditions, because of the warmer temperatures would deem the normal farming lands to be like unsuitable for growing these crops. And so this would limit the available farming areas and heavily reduce how much farming can really happen. And pests and diseases would be a much bigger threat since their species can start feeding and breeding a lot earlier, and because spring would be prolonged, they would be breeding for a much longer time as well. And so to go to the graphs, I'll show a little bit more about these blossoming dates. And like I said, this makes them susceptible to frost, so it can be a really huge issue. But yeah, the data kind of shows that and shows how they are actually, I don't know, sprouting earlier. So in this graph, you can see the changes in the first leaf date, and you can also see the changes in the first bloom date. The leaf is on the left, the bloom is on the right, and the blue dots show that it's more than 8 days. And you can see, and definitely in some of these warmer climates, where they're really not able to they're not able to live in these unsuitable conditions because the temperatures are rising. Their blooming at a much earlier date because of these false triggers. And like we talked about before, these false triggers will leave them susceptible to frost and harsh climates, and thus that will kill off the crops. And so to go to the next graph, it kind of shows a similar idea, but it just further supports that. This shows the leaf and bloom dates again in 48 of the states. And you can see definitely between the 1981 and 2010 average, you can see how it deviates a lot more when we get closer to where we are now. So like in 2010, you can see how it's starting to get a little lower. And basically through the trend, you can see how the first leaf and bloom dates are really varying from what's normal. And this would really just offset how all these species are relying on each other, and they'd be sprouting at times that are not suitable for them. And so that's pretty much all I wanted to share. Hopefully you're able to see like how these seasons are really being affected and what the effects of that are.
So to kind of elaborate on what Snikta was saying, so these extreme events, especially floods and droughts, can harm crops and reduce yields. So dealing with droughts could become a challenge in areas where rising summer temperature cause soils to become drier. Although increased irrigation might be possible in some places, in other places where water supplies might be reduced or limited, this leaves less water available for irrigation when more is needed. And these warm, moist winters also bring increased opportunities for pathogens, pests, and disease. So basically what these farmers really do not want for their kind of plantations or farming places. So many weeds, pests, and fungi thrive under warmer temperatures, wetter climates, and increased carbon levels. Currently, US farmers spend more than $11 billion per year to fight weeds, which compete with crops for light, water, and nutrients. So as Snikta was saying, these invasive species will increase with climate change. So the ranges and distribution of these weeds are likely to increase with climate change. This could cause new problems for farmers' crops previously unexposed to these species. As a result, crop care costs will further increase with higher temperatures as frequent droughts demand irrigation and new tolerant varieties. And also one really big kind of human impact for these with climate change and agriculture is that rising levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide can also reduce the concentrations of protein and essential minerals in most plant species, including wheat, soybeans, and rice. This direct effect of rising carbon levels on the nutritional value of crops represents a potential threat to human health. And then go on to like the livestock. So climate change may increase the prevalence of parasites and diseases that affect livestock. The earlier onset of spring and warmer winters could allow some parasites and pathogens to survive more easily. In areas with rainfall, moisture-reliant pathogens could thrive. Drought may also threaten pasture and feed supplies. Drought reduces the amount of quality forage available to grazing livestock, and some areas could experience longer, more intense droughts resulting from higher summer temperatures and reduced precipitation. For these animals that rely on grain changes in crop production due to drought could also become a problem. And then heat stress is also a big issue, as with climate change, there's an increased chance of heat waves. So heat stress affects animals both directly and indirectly. Over time, heat stress can cause vulnerability to disease, reduce fertility, and reduce milk production. And then to go on to fisheries, higher water temperatures have enabled an oyster parasite to spread further along the Atlantic coast. So actually in the Arctic, the winter warming is contributing to salmon diseases. I know for my family, we love kind of like that kind of Arctic salmon. That's actually like my dad's favorite. So it's definitely like crazy to know that salmon is going to be impacted with climate change. And warmer temperatures have caused disease outbreaks in coral, eelgrass, and abalone. And then kind of the effects of climate change on farmers in developing countries could destabilize local markets and curb economic growth. It's always important to think about how people in the global south or the most vulnerable populations are going to be impacted by climate change. And with the warmer temperatures, longer summers, and shorter, more moist winters, their food supplies can definitely be threatened, and that poses a big issue with food insecurity. And then one of the other effects of rising CO2 levels in the air is a higher kind of risk or higher, an increased increased supply almost, or increased pollen in the air. So I know I really struggle with allergies around this time of year. So climate change is definitely going to make things even worse for me and people who suffer from the pollen allergy.
These spiny spheres are plant pollen, as seen under a microscope. They're the culprit behind most seasonal allergies. Pollen can cause your immune system to kick into overdrive because your body sees the pollen as a harmful intruder. And as a result, your body produces histamines. Normally, they promote healing by increasing blood flow and inflammation, but they can lead to the nasty symptoms that we associate with allergies, like sneezing, runny noses, and watery eyes. Generally, people who suffer from allergies have it bad for several weeks during certain plants' growing seasons. But because of climate change, the level of pollen in the air is getting much worse. And that's bad news, whether you suffer from allergies or not. In order to grow and produce pollen, plants need to generate energy through photosynthesis. That requires water, sunlight, and a third necessary ingredient, carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide exists naturally in the atmosphere, but as we burn fossil fuels like coal in power plants or gasoline in our cars, we're putting more and more CO2 into the air. The more carbon dioxide there is in the air, the more plants grow and produce pollen. Take a look at this graph. These bars are the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere between 1996 and 2015. And this line is the amount of pollen produced per ragweed plant, a common source of allergens. As carbon dioxide increased, the ragweed produced more and more pollen. And pollen is an important part of a plant's reproductive cycle. So more pollen means more seeds, which means more plants producing more pollen the following season. But CO2 is increasing the level of pollen in another way as well. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, and it's called that because it traps the sun's heat energy in the Earth's atmosphere and is helping warm the planet, sort of like a greenhouse. As the climate warms, there are more days above freezing, which means more time that plants are active and producing pollen. This graph shows the number of days with above freezing temperatures in the US over the past 120 years. In the past 50 years, the US growing season has increased by over 10 days on average. And this isn't happening at the same rate everywhere. This map shows the increase in pollen season for ragweed between 1995 and 2015. While some places, like Texas, didn't see much change in their ragweed pollen season, most places, especially those in the northern US and southern Canada, saw pollen season increase by almost a month. And this isn't just happening in North America. Overall, most places around the world are seeing longer growing seasons, and as a result, more days with pollen as well. Pollen levels and allergies are only going to get worse from here if carbon emissions continue the way they are. This is the current production level of grass pollen, another common allergen source. By 2060, that level is expected to double. And by 2085, that amount will have more than tripled. While allergies can be annoying for the 1 in 5 Americans that suffer from them, they can usually be kept at bay with over-the-counter drugs. But in some, allergies can lead to severe reactions like anaphylaxis, where blood pressure drops and airways start swelling shut. And pollen grains can wreak havoc on people's lungs even if they don't suffer from seasonal allergies. In the US, asthma attacks induced by pollen have led to more than 20,000 emergency room visits per year. So if for no other reason than to protect your sinuses, it's important to reduce the amount of CO2 we're adding to the atmosphere. It can help curb how much we're warming the planet, and it can help slow the pollenocalypse.
Yeah, thank you so much for that video. I believe that is the last slide. Not again. Qatar, you want to cover this one?
Yeah, so we've kind of been talking about just in general how kind of the stretch seasons are going to impact the world, but we also wanted to kind of make the scope a little smaller and just focus on Connecticut, because I think when we think of climate change, we think of it on a bigger level or like a huger scope, but to really think about it locally or like what's happening in like your own backyard is very important. So climate change, or the variability in seasons, is affecting Connecticut as warmer waters means that fish native to the Long Island Sound are on the decline. This is due to increased water temperature, which affects egg development, spawning habitat, and food availability. And another big issue with increased water temperature is sea level rise, and 61% of Connecticut's coastal communities are prone to flooding. And this means that sections of I-95, rail lines, and local airports are expected to experience tidal flooding without storm action due to increased sea level. And then warmer temperatures actually also impact maple syrup a lot. I know I love maple syrup, and that's kind of like a staple in like the eastern like United States and in Canada. And with higher temperatures, maple syrup supply is really going to be impacted. So warmer temperatures challenge maple trees to maintain the slow flow for sap sugar levels. The season can come and go. Higher temperatures can also mean sugar is in the sap. This means that I'll take more sap to produce 1 gallon of syrup. This really stretches the maple syrup supply for these farmers.
And that's it for all, I think. Oh, sorry, but that's it. That's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed this short presentation. Yeah, there was a lot of talking, but I hope we really took it to heart or found something useful. If you want to help or want to join NHGM, you can always email us at newmanclimemovement@gmail.com. We have in-person and virtual opportunities to volunteer, so don't worry. And we also have paid internship for students, so be on the lookout for that. And check us out on YouTube, our website. Ghost us on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, just literally looking at our content. We put a lot of effort in it, so that you guys know what's going on. Even if you don't follow us, like literally just looking at it, that's enough. And yeah, thank you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful day. Well, a good night actually, because it's afternoon. Stay safe, stay healthy, and yeah.
Thank you, webinar team.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. Yeah, I definitely hope that you guys are able to take something away from this. So